Hi, I'm Kristina Whitney with Handi Quilter's Quilt Your Desire Inspiration Squad. Today I want to talk to you about record keeping or journaling. I recently talked to my grandmother and tried to do an interview with her, and I asked her how many quilts she's made in her lifetime. Her answer was, heavens, I have no idea. My dad, her son, has often talked to me and said, you need to make sure you record how many quilts you make. So what I did was I just took a little binder, and I'll look at those fun pictures of me on the front. Anyway, I took this binder and I have been keeping track of all of the quilts that I make. So I take pictures of them, and I don't know if you can see up close. I have a little paper there that tells me, it has the number of the quilt that I've done, the date that I did it, what size it is, what kind of technique I used, and then also a little note about it, like who it's for, who it's from, just some little reminder about it. So the reason why I did this book was not only just to keep track of it, but I also use it as motivation. I like to look back and see all the pictures of the quilts that I've done in the past. It helps me to feel motivated to try new things. It helps me to remember the things that I've learned, and also to help other people. So one thing that I find really important as quilters, especially in this time with social media, we see all of the quilts that other people are doing, and it's just amazing. But all we're seeing is their best work. So I always try to remember to compare myself to my previous quilts rather than to what other people are doing. And that helps me to see the improvement that I'm making. And of course, that helps me to feel better about myself also. Someday I might change this to a digital book rather than printing out pictures and trying to scrapbook, if you want to call it that. So that might be something I might do later on in the future. Another thing that I really like having this book for is when I have new customers come over and they want to see some of my quilting. I can show them my book and they can look through it, and I always have that available for them. So now that I've shared with you why I have my record quilting or my journal or my scrapbook, whatever you want to call it, I'm going to take you on a little trip through my scrapbook now and share some pictures with you. Some of them are embarrassing, some of them are fun, some of them are milestones, some are learning experiences, but just take a few minutes and we'll go through that together. So I'm going to share some examples with you. This picture right here is the very first quilt that I ever made. And this one's kind of special to me. My grandmother pieced the top, and I went to visit her one time and asked her if I could borrow one because I wanted to start on my long arm and I didn't have any quilt tops. So I took this one home with me and I quilted it and I took it back to her. And then the next time I went up there, it was still sitting on her couch. I was like, what is this doing here, Grandma? She's like, well, you finished it, so you get to take it home. So I currently have this quilt still on my bed, and it's one of my favorites, but it's the very first one I ever did. It's a continuous curve. Something that I learned from this is to maybe use rulers so that it's a little bit more accurate. My next one here is a little duck quilt, and I'm a little embarrassed about this one. So you guys are lucky that I'm sharing my embarrassing moments. I tried to do a pantograph. So I hand drew a duck, or I tried to hand draw a duck, and I put it on the back of the machine and tried using the laser, and it was a fail. So that's something I learned, is either I can digitize it or I can buy an already made pantograph. But yeah, this one was not one of my favorites. So that is that quilt. Let me find the next example I want to share with you. This is another fail. Take my little sticky note off so you can see the picture. So I'm going to share with you this story about this one. And I know other people have done the same thing, so I'm not going to be too embarrassed about it. But I loaded this quilt, and I got it probably 3/4 of the way quilted before I discovered I put the back on backwards, or inside out. So I have an ugly quilt. It's backwards. So that one went to charity. But I learned, and I have never since then put my quilt on the wrong direction or backwards. This next quilt, I learned not to use cheap thread. I had so many thread breaks, and it was just constantly breaking, and I wanted to pull my hair out. So this quilt here, sorry, I'm trying not to give you too much glare. I don't know if you can notice, but it's actually hanging right back there. And I use the same color thread in both the yellow and the blue. You can't really see it too well in the photograph, but I use blue thread. And I like this quilt, and I still have it hanging up. But I always thought, oh, I wonder what it would look like if I used two different colors of thread. So from this quilt, you'll see some examples coming up of ones where I tried changing the color of thread and trying new things. Okay, so this is one where I did change the thread color. I used blue or a navy blue and a white. And some of the designs where I had white fabric, I actually used the blue thread on the white. Others, let's see, on this one, I used the white thread in the white and the navy in the navy. And I just kind of played with it, and I had lots of fun and learned lots on this quilt. So not all of my examples are examples of failures or things that I've learned, but also milestones that I've hit. Things that have terrified me, but I finally did it and I got over it. So these quilts here were minky. I was terrified of minky. And they were also given to me just in strips. And the lady wanted me to piece it together on the long arm machine. So this one, I overcame my fear of minky, and I also learned how to piece on the machine. So those were fun ones. So another thing that I learned is when your quilting will show and when it will not. So if you look at this bottom picture here, it's one of my grandmother's quilt tops. It was very, very busy. My sister had me quilt it for her, and she wanted kind of a paisley thing, so I free motion quilted this one and just really intricate, spent tons and tons of time on it, and you can't see anything. And the backing was just as busy. So that was not a very good use of my time. On the other hand, if you want your quilting to show, look at the difference. This white one, you can see every little detail of the quilting. So that's the back of this quilt here. So you can make things show. Another thing that I really liked is making detail or texture. So on this one, I had a milestone where I was able to use Superior Threads monopoly, and I loved it. I didn't have to worry about changing the thread color, and it just really shows all of the texture in all of the different areas of the quilt. So I like that one. There's my cute grandma. I made a little wall hanging for her nursing home, and it's hanging up on the wall, and then when I get to go see her, it's there. And look, I put a label on that one too. Here's another quilt that I really enjoyed doing. I loved the fun colors. It had a lot of negative space, and I hadn't done a lot of quilting with negative space. I took a class and learned some new things, and I had a lot of fun filling in all of this extra space. So thanks for joining me today on my little walk down memory lane with all of my quilting. And I hope that maybe you learned some ideas. Maybe it helped you to feel better about what steps you're taking in your quilting. But the main thing that I want you to get out of this is that when you're almost 100 years old and your grandchildren and great-grandchildren come up to you and ask you, how many quilts have you made? That you'll be able to look back and share all of those accomplishments with them and pass that love of quilting on to your children.